Back to work. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and do the hood part, and I'll do the whole hood in this episode tutorial. If you have a pattern for a hood already, by all means use it. I didn't, so I just made my own. You can also just use, if you have like a hooded jacket, you could also just lay it flat and then draw it out on paper to make a paper pattern. Here I just use my own. I'm estimating that from the collarbone to the top of the head is 16 inches. That's what I measured on my body. Probably be just a little too big for the kid, but I mean, that's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. I'm going to cut two pieces of it, and then like in the picture, there's a rectangular section that goes down on this side of the hood. So I'm going to cut out a long rectangular piece in this length and then sew it on top. So let me go ahead and start cutting this and then cut the rectangle. Don't forget to also add your allowance, whether it be 1/2 inch or 5/8 seam allowance. And then I'm just going to cut a long rectangular piece here. Just getting rid of excess. If you notice, I do have this one on the fold, so that way I'm not like cutting a super long rectangle. I can just cut it probably halfway. I'm going to make this 4 inches wide. I'll put it up here. 4 inches wide, and I'll include the seam allowance in this. So in actuality, it'll be 3 inches wide once I fold it over and sew it on top of the hood. So see, now I have a long piece. So I'm going to sew from here all the way to about the corner of this curve. You're going to leave this part open and this part, obviously, because that's where you see through. That's like where your face goes. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this through. Sew this on top of the top seam of the hood, and then we'll move on to the actual structural part of the hood. So I've put together my hood. I'm about to do the front. I'll call this like the tiara part of the hood. So according to my measurements on the hood that I did, let me get it. I put bias tape underneath to finish the hood, and I measured out from the end of my little rectangle here 4.5 inches and 4.5 inches. So all this together between here and here is 13 inches. So I cut out a little tiara piece, and this is 13 inches long. I went ahead and I curved it out, cut it. If it looks crooked when you do it, you can always fold it and then just cut it to where it makes a tiara-like shape. And just for reference, this is a little bit between 2.5 and 2 3/4, and then the highest point here is 3 3/4. So I'm going to use this as a pattern. I already traced it on my heavy interfacing. I'm going to cut one of the interfacing, and then I'm going to cut 2 of my sweatshirt fabric, and then I'm going to flip it inside out, sew on top of the seams, and then I will move on to the actual mouth part that swivels or whatever. So let me do that, and then I'll show you what it looks like. So I made this part. This is a little tricky. It took me about 10 minutes to work with it in the mirror to straighten it. But it's not going to lie flat. As you can see, there's a little space here. It's going to stick out. It sticks up, see? Kind of like a visor. You're going to have to wear the hood and fit these pieces on and straighten everything and pin in place before you start sewing. It's just easier to do it that way, in my opinion. But do it carefully, don't stab your head, please. Make sure during pinning that you have a small space between the tiara part and your forehead. Then go ahead and stitch it down in place. I'm sewing the sides in like a little square shape because while it's pinned, it can move, and I want this part to be stationary. And then the mouthpiece can swivel. And then I'll explain the mouthpiece part in the next part, I guess. Okay, so moving on to the mouthpiece. Now, your measurements may differ, but I chose to cut out a 15-inch long strip of heavy interfacing. And it's 5 inches wide. So you want to position it and see where it lies on your hood. Again, it's better to make an error with it being too big than too small and having to start over. That's just rule of thumb, I guess you could say. And then when you position it, you know, just kind of bend it over and see where it's going to be. You notice there's going to be a small dip, like in the picture, on the top of the mouthpiece, and then on the bottom, there's, because it's not going to be like that, that looks too boxy, there's going to be a rounding of the edges towards the bottom of the strip on each end of this mouthpiece strip, I guess you could say. So yeah, you definitely don't want it all boxy, and it is going to curve. And then you kind of want to position it, as you can see here in the video, it's kind of overlapping in the corners diagonally on the end of the tiara part. So you just want to mess with it and see where is going to be the best place for it to cover your mouth, and not covering your eyes or your nose, but covering your mouth area. And then, with this piece, you'll put the buttonholes, and then you can move it up and down and all that good stuff. Again, sorry for the crappy voiceover. I don't know what happened to this video's audio. God. Let's see, I'm just messing with it here. So yeah, just keep messing with it. Find the perfect spot. Cut it. Shape it. And then you'll cut out, just one of the heavy interfacing, as you can see, the one I'm messing with, and then cut out 2 pieces of your sweatshirt material. And then sew it, fold it inside out, top stitch it on the outside perimeter of the strip, and then just sew it on or put a buttonhole. Just make sure everything's even. Sewing down the mouthpiece. Okay, so for the final step here, we're going to do the shoulder pads. I showed you in the last video how to do the little things on the hood, which I have already attached, which I will show you in a second. Now with this, you're going to have a couple separate pieces. You're going to cut out one of these of your foam stabilizer, another smaller crescent shape of the foam stabilizer, and each piece is going to have 2 of the sweatshirt materials. Now there's no real exact pattern for this. I'm sorry, I kind of did this one by eyeballing it, but I did kind of just take a piece and I put it over the shoulder, and I saw that it fit, so that's how I used it. Now with the first piece that goes on the shoulder, it kind of reminds me of a misshapen football. It'll have this, it'll get flat here in the center, and then it'll come out again. So it's kind of like a football or a retarded boomerang, I don't know. But you can see the shape here. It's like this, and then this is round, And then this one is just smaller, which you can also eyeball once you get this piece on your shoulder. So it'll be like this, and then this will come around, and you'll see it right now on a mannequin. So when you get these pieces, the first thing you're gonna do when you cut this out and you figure out what's gonna work best with your shoulder pad is you're gonna fold it in half, and you're gonna go up 1.5 inches, and it's gonna be a 1/2 inch dart. And you're gonna do this on the foam stabilizer for this big piece, and you're gonna do the same thing for both hooded sweatshirts. And then once you have all that together, then you will pin it. You'll pin this, and then you'll sew around. Maybe you'll want to stop somewhere here or here, because you'll need to flip it inside out and then just, you know, fold it back in and sew a straight stitch. And then once I did flip it inside out, I did go over the edges with my largest stitch that I can do. I did the same thing here. So let me show you how it looks on the mannequin. Ugh. Okay, so here you can see which is this part, which is what I was talking about with the dart. You see how it has the dart here? So I pinned this first over it, and it's right with the line of the, I don't know if you can see, of the sleeve. So try and line it, pin it, just to hold this in place. And then once you do that, then I pinned this one on top of it. I got it where I wanted, and then I took this off, and then I was able to sew it flat with my machine where it is. And then I added this one back in, pin it in place. As you can see, it kind of comes out towards the chest. Where my finger is running is where it ends. This is how it is. And then just stitch it in place. So that's how you're gonna do it, and then it should be done after that. Okay, so just some afterthought about this project. That I was very satisfied with it. I'm actually incredibly satisfied. You know, it was a gift. I obviously couldn't fit my son to get the hood, you know, on some things I guessed, and I took my own measurements, which obviously, like I said in the beginning, at some point, it's better to, you know, do it bigger in error than smaller, because then you'll just have to start over again. So just a couple things that while doing this project I realized, you know, we all make mistakes. So number one, some things I always say is get the right needle, have the right needle for the job. Well, I did technically have the right needle, but it was for lightweight to medium, or, you know, light to light medium knits, you know, the lighter side of the needle spectrum. When I got towards the shoulder pads, it was a lot of layers. You know, it was the sweatshirt material is already thick on its own. Add that with triple layer of sweatshirt material plus the foam stabilizer, super thick. I went through 2 packages of yellow band ballpoint needles, the light kind that I had. I have a bunch of needles, so it didn't hurt me too much. But finally, I realized when I was looking through my stash, I had yellow ballpoint needles in a medium weight knit fabric, which is obviously thicker and is what I should have started sewing with in the beginning. Just, you know, sometimes I'm an idiot, you know, you don't think of these things. But if you're going to do this project, please invest in the medium weight knit ballpoint needles. It'll save you a whole lot of headache later on towards the end. Everything was going fine until I got to that part, and it what should have took me 15 to 20 minutes to do the shoulder pads ended up being longer than that, because I kept getting skip stitches because the needle was too thin. It was bending, it was breaking, and then finally when I put in the medium weight knit needle, it sewed perfectly. So please keep that in mind. Also, When cutting the foam stabilizer, like a problem I encountered towards the end with the shoulder pads, it shifts a lot. So I had a problem towards the end where even though I did it separately, I did one shoulder pad cutout on one piece of stabilizer, and then I did a separate one for the other one. I didn't do it at the same time. So I ended up with a non-matching pieces. One was about 2 inches longer than the other, because even though I'm cutting, like, the scissors were moving around the foam stabilizer, so it added some length as I cut it. So with that, just be really careful. If you can use a rotary tool for that, I would say yes, to keep it accurate and to keep anything from slipping and adding length on those pieces. And also when you do it, just measure them out, make sure they're the same, because it's so frustrating to get to that point where you're just at the end to sew them both on and then to realize that one's longer than the other, and that just looks terrible. And then another thing, of course, that I need to go back and adjust now that my son can wear it is the hood part. It was too big, like I thought it would be, and then just adjust the mouthpiece on it too. But just a couple things like that I thought of. Just, I really stress the needle thing. Like, please, if you're going to do this project, please get the medium weight ballpoint needles. Just do it, please. All right. Well, thanks so much, and have a happy new year. Bye-bye.